Hi students, I just wanted to give you a little tour through the parts of the 1940 census assignment, responding to some questions that various people have asked me. So we're going to go through, just by example, looking at the various steps you have to do. So let's start with part one, where you've got to find your ancestor in the 1940 census in ancestry.com or familysearch.org. So we'll switch over to there. And use an example which I showed you in class of my great uncle, for whom I know his first and his last name. I know he was 15 in 1940, and I know that he was born in Georgia. You might know more information about the family member that you're looking for, but this is just to demonstrate that with some fairly basic information, you can often find people, particularly if they have unusual names. If you're looking for someone with a fairly common name, and in Minnesota, I think you can think of some quintessential examples. If your family name is Johnson or Anderson, you might need to know more information about the family. Your great-grandparents, for example, your great-aunts, to add more information about who's in the family. So put in their information, first name, last name, what year they were born, and then where they were born. If you're not sure about something, you can sort of try finding them with that information or without that information. Sometimes it's easier to not have that information and then scroll through to sort of recognize the family that you're looking for. So we'll search, and then we find here's the person I'm looking for. So click through to view record, and then click on the picture, and we'll view that. And now we've got that, it's all highlighted. And the first part of your assignment is to save that information. You want to save this to your computer, and this is the first thing that you're going to do, is submit the image. I think you all know how our web browser works. It'll download, and then you have that file there which you can look at. Let's look at the next part of the assignment instructions. You've now got the image. Now what you need to do is list the household number. So let's look at this image here on the census sheet, and I've told you that it's column 3, and that is here. So column 3 runs right down here. You'll see these numbers are basically sequential down the page. The person who's taking the census is going around and listing every household sequentially. And so you might need to enlarge the picture. These were 11 by 17 basically pieces of paper on which they had to write the information about 40 different people, and they had about 30 different questions, so everything's a little small. One of the nice things about this being digitized is that you can enlarge it and read it more easily. So here is my great uncle's family, and the household number in this context is household number 126. I've also asked you for the line number on which your ancestor appears. And so switching back to the image, here's the person that I'm interested in, Norman, down here, and here's the line number 49. If we scroll across this page, you'll see that the line numbers are repeated on the other side of the page, so that when you're looking at the answers to the other questions where you're a long way from the name, you can always remember what the line number was and then work out who's answering the question. Okay, so now we've done the first part of the assignment. The third little question here is, did you have any difficulties finding the person? So just what I'm wanting you to do here is tell me how the assignment went for you. There's no penalty for having had difficulty. This is just a chance to document your work and tell me what you learned. Maybe you learned something surprising. And then that carries through to question number 4. Tell me what interested you about what you found about this person. We all have preconceptions about what the past was like, that they all lived in black and white, and that they didn't have color TV. So tell me what surprised you about what it was like to be living in 1940 from the census. Okay, moving on to question 5. You're still looking at the image of the census, and now you're looking out from your relatives' household, and you're seeing how do they fit in the context of their street. Were they a typical family? And so I've asked you to perhaps look down the columns at the answers that people gave. Let's look at this one. This is birthplace. And you can see here that surrounding my uncle's family, there's a lot of people who were born in New York, and then there's my uncle's family, and they're born in Georgia, apart from my great uncle there. Looking further down the page, remember this is New York. It's Brooklyn. We know that today Brooklyn has a lot of immigrants. Well, looking all the way down this page, we see some people from England, from people from Pennsylvania. Those are pretty. Pennsylvania is pretty close to New York, and then we have a whole lot of other people from New York. So just your casual impression is that my uncle's family were a little unusual by being migrants from the South. There are people here who are born in New York, have stayed in New York, but they're the only migrants from the South. So at least on this page, their immediate neighbors, they were perhaps a little unusual. Looking at other things on the same page, that's where I want you to get the motivation to look more broadly beyond the page at how typical was your ancestor in the context of a larger place. So let's look at some other questions. These are just to sort of suggest interesting questions which were tabulated in the census publications and which you'll be able to find information on. Here are questions about where people were living 5 years ago on April 1, 1935. And if you look all the way down, you will see that the majority of people on this street 5 years earlier were living in the same place. But you want to read closely. You'll see that same place is actually a different answer from same house, same home, which is also provided as the answer in some other contexts. And for people who were living in a different country or a different state or territory, they provide more information. So you can see that 5 years ago, this family from Germany, next door to my my great uncle, they weren't living in the same house. They weren't living in the same county in New York. They were living in Germany, so they were fairly recent migrants from Germany. If you remember the context of 1940 and you look at their names, you might be sort of interested. These look like Jewish names. Perhaps these are Jewish refugees. I don't know. But these are the kinds of things that you should be interested in and you should be sort of thinking about as you look at the census. Who are these people? Then let's look at their occupations. This is, I think, a sort of a fascinating column which tells us something about the lives of people at this time. So here we see a social worker and a school teacher, a reporter, a secretary, salesman, a designer. So those are fairly middle-class professional occupations. A lot of them would have gone to college. Then there's a meat cutter, a timekeeper who seems to be working in a factory, a janitor, a clerk or a clerk and typist, a lawyer, another clerk. So this seems to be a somewhat middle-class area, but there's some mix of occupations. I think you'll all see that a janitor is quite different social status than a lawyer. The questions that are being asked are listed up here, and then the answers follow down the page. Some of the columns are just codes, and you can ignore them, and it's denoted like that at the top. As I think I mentioned in class, one of the questions they ask for people who were wage or salary earners is what their income was in the preceding year. And so that might be interesting information for you. If we look all the way down at the bottom of the page, we come to another set of interesting questions, and this is called the sample line. 2 people out of 40 on the page were selected to be asked extra questions. And you can see that they're asked about the place of birth of their mother and father, the language they spoke, whether they were a veteran or not, and then some additional information about their workplace, about how many children they had when they were married, and then there's some over here. These are internal sort of Census Bureau tabulations. They were calculating all this by hand. Okay, so now we've looked at the page, you've got an idea of what thing you want to look at. So we're going to go and look up the statistics in the 1940 census reports. So we come to this website here on the Census Bureau. These links are at the bottom of the assignment page down here. Okay, so on the Census Bureau page, they go in descending order, starting from the most recent census. And then if you click on Census of Population and Housing in 1940, then click on 1940 Census of Population, it will expand. And what you're looking for is probably going to be volume 2 to find information about the particular place that you're interested in. How do you find where your ancestor was living in 1940? Let's flip back to the page. The place in which they were living is in the header at the top of the page. And here we find out that he was living in the state of New York, in the county of Kings, and in New York City. Typically, the information that you'll be looking for is going to be about the city or the county or the state. You can choose either one. I will tell you that you'll most consistently find information about larger places, so states or counties or large cities. The reporting about places may change over time. They're basically concerned to not let too much information out by reporting on really small places. So if you find your ancestors in a small town, and by small town I mean even somewhere as small as St. Cloud or Mankato in 1940, probably won't be reported separately. But you'll certainly find information about Minneapolis and St. Paul together, and you'll certainly find information about the state of Minnesota or Hennepin County or Ramsey County or other counties. This is where you'll need to do a little bit of exploration about what information is reported. So let's have a look in volume 2. Click on characteristics of the population, and then we want to look at part 5 here, which is New York. At this point, you're going to have to download this document, open it up, and start looking through there for the statistics about the question that you're interested in. And you can see that the questions that are documented in these volumes are listed here. What was the sex composition? How old were people? The race? Where were they born? Were they citizens? Were they attending school? What kind of workers were they? So these are the major questions that are documented there. So you'll have a look at that. This is where you'll be spending probably the majority of your time is on this part of the question. Once you've looked at that topic for the area that you're interested in 1940, you can select any other later census from 1960 onwards, and what you're doing is finding the same place in that census and telling me about the same question. So let's say you selected occupation. Now we're going to look for the characteristics of, for example, New York City or Kings County and its occupations in 1980. So again, we scroll down to the state of New York and find the different parts of the document that we're interested in. This is why I say this will take you the most time. And at the head of this, at the head of every listing for the different census volumes, it'll tell you the types of information that will be listed. So we'll scroll it back down to New York, and a little shortcut to find out which file you need to download is that it has the title page here. So click on that, download it. We'll just wait for it to download here, and hopefully then it will show us what is in what is in that volume. Okay, so here we are. This is our guide to New York 1980 and the tables that are reported here. Let's say we'd chosen occupation. We'll just scroll down here, and we'll see that it reports occupation, and it will report it for the various cities, and these are the pages on which it appears in this volume. So this is where this part of the assignment you're going to have to look at some statistical tables and find the same place in different years. So know the county that your ancestor was living in 1940, and then look for the same place and the same question in 1980. I hope this has been helpful for you. If you have any other questions, please feel free to send me an email, and we'll certainly discuss this in class next Monday on the 19th of September. I hope you have a great week with Zamzam, and then with Lara talking about IFMS International on Wednesday. Bye-bye.